I used to think I was the kind of man who didn't check his wife's phone. I thought that meant something. I thought it meant I was steady, reasonable, not one of those men who let suspicion turn them into somebody small. Then one February night in Duluth, I sat in my truck across from the North Star Motor Lodge with the heater off so the windshield wouldn't fog, watching my wife come out of room 14 with a girl half her age tucked under her arm. There was a paper cup of gas station coffee in my console, cold enough to have a skin on top. Snow tapped against the glass in dry little clicks. My left hand was wrapped around my phone, waiting for a call I was too afraid to make. Marin was wearing the red scarf I bought her our first Christmas together. The girl beside her was crying. And for one awful second before I understood anything, I thought, so this is what the end looks like. My name is Owen Hayes. I'm 40 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've made a living fixing old things that other people were ready to give up on. Windows that wouldn't close right. Porch steps sagging toward the yard. Original hardwood floors hidden under carpet and glue. Houses with bones still good enough to save, if someone had the patience to crawl under them in January with a flashlight and a bad back. I liked the work because it was honest. Wood didn't pretend. If there was rot, you found it. If a beam had cracked, you could trace the pressure that made it split. People were harder. People could stand in a warm kitchen, look you in the eye, and still keep half their life somewhere you couldn't reach. Marin used to say I trusted houses more than humans. She wasn't wrong. She was a school librarian at a public high school. The kind of woman who remembered which freshmen liked graphic novels, but was too embarrassed to ask for them. Who kept granola bars in her desk drawer for kids who forgot breakfast, which we both knew sometimes meant there hadn't been breakfast. She marked pages with grocery receipts and wrote notes on the backs of old library cards. For years, I found them tucked into my lunchbox. Don't forget your gloves. Leftover soup is better with pepper. You look tired this morning. Come home safe. We lived in a narrow 2-story house not far from the lake, old enough that every storm found a new way inside. The roof above the back room had been threatening us for 2 winters. We had a whiteboard in the kitchen where I'd written, "Roof Fund. Do not touch unless water is falling on our heads." Marin had drawn a little umbrella next to it. That was us. Not perfect, not flashy. 2 working people with a leaky house, a freezer full of soup, and the kind of marriage that ran on quiet routines. She made tea before bed. I checked the basement pipes. She read beside me while I fell asleep with the TV remote on my chest. I had history, though. The kind that sits under the floorboards. My father left when I was 16, but before he left, he had already made a second life somewhere else. Different woman, different house, different child. My mother found out through a birthday card mailed to our home by mistake. I remember her standing at the kitchen sink with the card in her hand, water running over a plate she wasn't washing anymore. She didn't cry in front of me that day. That made it worse. The child was a girl. I never met her. I knew her name only because my mother said it once, years later, after too much wine at Thanksgiving. Maddie. I hated the name for a long time. Not because of her, though I didn't understand that then. I hated what the name meant. It meant my father had spent birthdays somewhere else. It meant there were photographs we weren't in. It meant every time he said he was working late, he might have been reading bedtime stories in another house. So when Marin came into my life, I told myself I would not bring that damage with me. I would be better than the men who passed their wounds around like family heirlooms. For a long time, I believed I was. The first change was small enough that I almost missed it. Marin started coming home late on Tuesdays, then Thursdays. Not midnight late, not dramatic. Just late enough that dinner sat in the microwave too long, and the kitchen light stayed on while snow gathered along the window frame. "I'm helping sort donated books," she said the first time, unwrapping her scarf with fingers red from the cold. The English department got a whole storage closet full of them. I believed her because it sounded exactly like something she would do. Marin could not pass a box of neglected books without feeling personally responsible for their future. The second Thursday, I called the school around 7 because her phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself I was being normal. Husband checking on wife during a snowstorm. Nothing strange about that. The night custodian answered. "Library?" he said. "Lights have been off since 5:30. I stood there with my hand on the kitchen counter, looking at the 2 bowls of reheated pasta I had set out. "Oh," I said. "Must mixed up the day. Thanks." When Marin came home 40 minutes later, her hair was damp from melted snow. Her coat carried a smell I didn't recognize at first. Sharp and stale cigarette smoke. Marin hated cigarettes. She complained if someone smoked near the grocery store doors. "You okay?" I asked. She paused too long before answering. "Just tired." There was a plastic bag in her hand from a discount store across town. When she went upstairs to change, I looked inside. Socks, toothpaste, canned soup, a cheap gray towel, a pack of peanut butter crackers. None of it was incriminating. That was the problem. Suspicion doesn't need proof. It feeds on gaps. I folded the receipt and put it back exactly where I found it. That night, she slept facing away from me. I stared at the slope of her shoulder under the quilt and told myself marriage required trust, not surveillance. Then her phone lit up. One letter on the screen. M. I didn't touch it. I want that on the record, even if there is no record except the one in my own head. I didn't pick it up. I didn't unlock it. I didn't read the message. But I saw the preview. I can't go back there. My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Marin reached for the phone so quickly I knew she had been awake. Who's M? I asked. She held the phone against her stomach. A student, at 10:30 at night. She's having a hard time. Then why is she texting your personal phone? Varen sat up. In the blue glow from the screen, she looked older than she had that morning. Not guilty exactly, scared. Owen, she said quietly, I need you to trust me for a little while. There are sentences that sound gentle until they land on an old bruise. Trust me for a little while. My father used to say, don't worry about it, buddy. Same shape. Same locked door. I tried to be calm. I asked if she was in trouble. She said no. I asked if we were in trouble. She looked down at the blanket and said, not if you can trust me. I slept badly after that. Or I pretended to sleep. Mostly I listened to the old radiator knock in the wall and watched the shadow of Marin's phone on the nightstand. The next week, the roof fund changed. I noticed because I was at the hardware store pricing ice shield when my card declined. Not declined exactly, but the account balance was lower than it should have been. I stood in aisle 6 between buckets of roofing nails and felt my face go hot. At home, I opened the bank app. A withdrawal, $2,800. Cash. 3 days earlier. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in front of me until the screen dimmed. On the whiteboard, beneath my neat block letters about the roof, Marin's little umbrella smiled like a joke. When she came in, I didn't yell. I wish I could say that was because I was noble. It wasn't. It was because some part of me had gone cold. Did you take money from the roof account? She stopped with one boot half off. Yes. For what? I can't tell you everything yet. You took almost $3,000 from our savings and you can't tell me? Her mouth trembled. I will. I promise. I just need a few more days. A few more days for what? She looked past me toward the dark kitchen window where our reflections stood like two strangers in the same room. For someone to be safe, she said. That should have changed the conversation. A better man might have heard those words and asked different questions. But by then my mind had already started building its own story, brick by brick. Someone, not something, someone. A man? A child? A secret? A mistake? The next morning I found packaging for a prepaid phone in the outside trash, tucked under a pizza box. I stood in the alley in my work boots, breath smoking in the air, holding that empty cardboard like it weighed 50 pounds. I hated myself a little then. Not enough to stop. The worst thing about suspicion is how quickly it starts calling itself responsibility. I wasn't snooping, I told myself. I was protecting my marriage. I wasn't invading her privacy. I was trying to understand why my wife had become unreachable in her own kitchen. I started noticing everything. Her odometer. The way she turned her phone face down. The extra laundry she did with only a few things in the machine. The way she flinched when I walked into a room too quietly. I kept measurements for work in a small black notebook. Window widths, trim lengths, estimates for lumber. Soon the back pages were full of numbers that had nothing to do with houses. Miles on Marin's car. Times she left. Times she returned. Addresses from receipts. Every time I wrote something down, I felt like I was becoming a man I wouldn't have wanted my wife to love. Then I found the motel receipt. It was in the pocket of her green coat, folded twice, soft from being handled. North Star Motor Lodge. Room 14. Paid through Friday. The North Star was one of those places you drove past without looking directly at it. Low brick building near the highway, half the neon sign burned out so at night it read North Star. The kind of place with plastic curtains and weekly rates written on the office window. I drove past it on my lunch break that day. Just drove past. At least that's what I told myself. There was snow piled around the lot, gray from exhaust. A vending machine glowed outside the office. A woman in a hoodie smoked near the stairwell. Room 14 had its curtains closed. I parked across the street for maybe 2 minutes, my hands on the wheel, staring at that door. Then I left before anyone saw me. That evening, Marin made tomato soup, the kind from a can with milk added because she said water made it taste lonely. She talked about a sophomore who had started reading again after his older brother moved out. She sounded like herself. That almost made me angrier. How could she stand there stirring soup and carrying whatever she was carrying? How was school? I asked. Busy. Library? She nodded. I watched her lie to me with tired eyes and a wooden spoon in her hand. Later, when she went upstairs, I opened the trunk of her car. I am not proud of that. There was a purple backpack under an old blanket. It had a little whale keychain hanging from the zipper. Inside were clothes too small for Marin, a pair of worn sneakers, 2 paperback novels from her school library, and a spiral notebook covered with doodles in black pen. In the side pocket was a folded note. Room paid through Friday, no name, no explanation. Just enough to ruin the last piece of restraint I had. Marin came outside while I was standing there with the trunk open. For a second, neither of us moved. Snow was falling between us, soft and steady. The porch light made every flake look suspended. Her face changed when she saw the backpack in my hand. "Owen, are you seeing someone?" The question came out quieter than I expected. That made it worse. She shut her eyes. "Not the way you think." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "That is not an answer." "I know. Then give me one." "I can't. Can't or won't." She hugged herself in her wool coat. She hadn't even put on gloves. "I made a promise." "To who?" She didn't answer. The soup burned that night. Neither of us noticed until the smell reached the hallway. Marin turned off the stove with shaking hands. I stood by the table, looking at the mug we bought in Grand Marais on our anniversary, the one with a chipped blue rim. I slid it away from me because I was afraid I might knock it over just to hear something break. "You're making me feel crazy," I said. "I know." "No, Marin, I don't think you do. I am walking around our house like every room has a trapdoor in it. You took money, you bought a phone, you lied about where you were. There's a motel receipt in your coat and a teenage girl's backpack in your trunk. And every time I ask you what's happening, you tell me to trust you." Tears slipped down her face, but she didn't wipe them. "I am trying to protect someone." "From me?" Her silence answered before she did. "Partly," she whispered. That one went through me clean. I stepped back from the table. "Who am I to you right now?" "My husband." "No." Husbands get told the truth. And sometimes husbands bring old pain into new rooms. I stared at her. She seemed to regret it immediately, but she didn't take it back. "My father has nothing to do with this," I said. Marin's voice broke. "He has everything to do with how you're hearing me." There it was, the thing under the thing. I grabbed my coat off the chair. "Owen, please don't leave like this. I don't know how to stay like this." I drove for 20 minutes with no destination, tires hissing through slush. Duluth at night in winter can feel like the edge of the world. Hills dropping toward black water, streetlights blurred by snow, houses glowing with other people's lives. My phone rang twice. "Marin." I didn't answer. Then I saw her car pass in the opposite direction. There was no thought after that, just motion. I turned around too fast, the back of my truck sliding before the tires caught. I followed at a distance, heart hammering with a mix of dread and shame. She drove to the North Star Motor Lodge. I parked across the road where I had parked before. This time I didn't leave. Marin went to room 14 and knocked softly. The door opened a few inches. I couldn't see who opened it. She slipped inside. 5 minutes passed. 10. I told myself to go home. I told myself to call her. I told myself there was still a line I had not crossed. Then the door opened. Marin stepped out with a girl beside her. The girl had the purple backpack. Her hair was dark and cut blunt at her chin. She wore a coat too thin for the weather, and she held one sleeve pulled over her hand like a child hiding in fabric. She was crying hard but quietly, like she had learned not to make too much noise. Marin put an arm around her shoulders. Something in me cracked, but not in the way I expected. I got out of the truck. Marin saw me first. Her whole body stiffened. The girl looked up, and then she said my name. Not "who are you?" Not "what's going on?" She looked at me through the falling snow and said, "Owen." I stopped in the middle of the lot. There are moments when your life doesn't change with a bang. It changes with one familiar name in a stranger's mouth. Marin took a step toward me. "Owen, listen to me. How does she know my name?" The girl moved behind Marin, like she expected me to shout. Marin's face was pale. "This is Maddie." I heard the name before I understood it. Maddie, the kitchen sink. My mother's wet hands. A birthday card opened by mistake. Years of anger folded into 2 syllables. "No," I said. Marin nodded, tears freezing at the edge of her lashes. "She's your sister." The motel room was too warm and smelled like old carpet, cigarette smoke from somewhere outside, and the kind of lemon cleaner that never actually cleaned anything. A small heater rattled under the window. On the table were 2 untouched sandwiches, a cup of instant noodles, and a stack of library books with Marin's school barcode stickers on the spines. Maddie sat on the bed with the purple backpack against her knees. I stood by the door because I didn't know if I had the right to come farther in. Marin told me in pieces. Maddie had found her at the school 3 weeks earlier. Not in the library exactly, but outside after dismissal, waiting near the bike racks in a sweatshirt while the temperature dropped. She knew Marin's name from an old newspaper announcement about our wedding that my aunt had posted online years ago. She had gone looking because she didn't know where else to go. Her mother was gone. Not dead, just gone in the way some people leave before anyone can ask them not to. There had been a boyfriend, a move, a promise that Maddie could come later. Then no money, no stable place, no reliable phone. Maddie had been sleeping wherever people let her sleep. A couch, a laundry room in an apartment building. Once the backseat of a car that didn't belong to her. Marin had bought the prepaid phone so Maddie could reach her. The motel was temporary because the shelters were full, and Maddie had begged not to be reported before she understood what would happen next. The cash was for the room, clothes, food, and time. Just time. She made me promise not to tell you right away, Marin said. She was terrified you'd hate her. I looked at Maddie then. She didn't look like my father. That was the first thing I noticed, and I hated myself for looking. She had my mother's hands, though. Or maybe that was just my mind trying to punish me. Long fingers, nails bitten short. I didn't want anything, Maddie said. Her voice was small but flat, like she had practiced not needing people. I just wanted to know if you were real. I sat down in the only chair. The room went quiet except for the heater. All those weeks, I had imagined a man, a betrayal, a secret life Marin preferred to me. I had built a whole courtroom in my head and found her guilty before I knew the charge. And there, on the bed, was a 17-year-old girl with wet shoes and library books, apologizing for existing. I looked at Marin. You should have told me. I know. You let me think. I know, she said again. And this time there was no defense in it. I was wrong. But I thought if I told you before she was ready, before I knew she wouldn't disappear, you would react from the part of you that still hurts. And Owen, I couldn't risk her running. That should have made me angry. It did. But underneath it was something worse. Recognition. Because she was right, not completely. Not enough to excuse the lying, but enough to hurt. Maddie wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. I can go. No, Marin said immediately. I should have said it too. I didn't. Not fast enough. Maddie heard the delay. Her shoulders folded inward. That delay stayed with me. We brought her home that night because there was no world in which either of us could leave her in that room after everything had been said. She sat in the back seat of Marin's car with the backpack on her lap. I drove behind them, headlights catching the red scarf against Marin's coat, feeling like a man following the wreckage of his own assumptions. At home, Marin made up the couch with the heavy quilt from the cedar chest. Maddie tried to say she didn't need a pillow. Marin gave her two. I stood in the hallway uselessly, holding a glass of water nobody had asked for. When Maddie finally fell asleep, I went out to the workshop. The workshop was an old detached garage I had insulated badly and loved anyway. It smelled like sawdust, mineral spirits, and cold metal. A chair I was repairing sat upside down on the bench, one leg clamped, glue drying along a split. I ran my thumb over the crack in the wood. Pressure always finds the weak place. I thought about my father. Not the man he became in my memory, all villain and shadow, but the real one. The one who taught me to square a board. The one who came to my Little League games until he didn't. The one who lied so thoroughly that even the good memories felt contaminated afterward. For years, I had told myself the second family destroyed mine. But Maddie hadn't destroyed anything. She had been a child, a baby probably, while I was hating her name. The adults had made the mess. The children had inherited the weather. Marin found me out there around 2 in the morning. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed against the cold. I'm sorry, she said. I nodded. I know that's not enough. No, I said, but it's a start. She came in and leaned against the workbench, not too close. That was one of the things I loved about Marin. Even when she was hurting, she understood space. I should have trusted you, she said. I should have been more trustworthy with that part of myself. She looked at me then. I kept my eyes on the chair leg. When I found the receipt, I didn't ask what you were afraid of. I asked what you were guilty of. You were scared. I was cruel in my head before I was scared out loud. Marin's face softened, but she didn't let me off easy. You followed me. I know. You searched my car. I know. That can't be nothing just because the truth was complicated. I know. For a while we listened to the wind push snow against the garage door. Then I said the thing I had been avoiding since the motel. When you said you were protecting someone partly from me, I hated you for about 10 seconds. Her eyes filled. Then I realized I had given you reasons to think that. Marin shook her head. Not reasons to lie. Reasons to worry. It was a fair distinction. Marriage lives or dies in fair distinctions. The next morning, I made coffee before anyone else woke up. Black for me. Too much cream for Marin. I set both mugs on the kitchen table, then put my phone beside them, face up. My truck keys, too. Marin came downstairs in yesterday's sweater, hair tied back, eyes swollen from not sleeping. I don't want to live in a house where we hide things to protect each other, I said. Neither do I. But I also don't want to live in a house where silence makes me become a detective. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I don't know how to fix this in one morning. We don't. That was the first honest thing either of us had said that didn't hurt. Maddie woke up later and came into the kitchen like she expected to be told she had overstayed something. She had folded the quilt and placed it on the couch with almost military neatness. You don't have to do that, Marin said gently. Maddie shrugged. I do. No, I said, then stopped because both of them looked at me. My voice came out rougher than I wanted. You don't have to earn breakfast. Maddie looked down. I made toast because it was the only thing I could think to do with my hands. I burned the first 2 slices. Marin didn't comment. Maddie ate one of them anyway. We talked carefully. Not like a family yet. More like people crossing a frozen lake, testing each step. Marin called a counselor she trusted from the school. Then a social worker. Then a youth housing program that had a waiting list, but also a woman named Renee, who spoke like she had seen every version of panic and knew which drawers held the forms. Maddie sat at the table with her sleeves pulled over her hands, answering questions when she could. I didn't try to take charge. Every instinct in me wanted to fix the situation the way I fixed houses. Assess damage, gather tools, start tearing out rot. But Maddie was not a project. She was a person who had been handled too much by other people's decisions. So I asked, what do you want to happen today? She looked surprised by the question. Today? Just today. She thought for a long time. I don't want to go back to the motel. Okay, I said. Then you don't. It was the smallest promise. It still felt enormous. We cleaned the little room under the eaves that afternoon. It had been half storage, half future plan. Boxes of Christmas lights, paint cans, a broken lamp I kept swearing I would rewire. Maddie stood in the doorway and said it was too much. Marin said, it's a room. I carried boxes downstairs. Maddie carried 1 stack of old towels and apologized when she dropped them. I told her towels were famous for surviving falls. She almost smiled. That should have been the turning point. Real life is less tidy. That evening, Marin and I had the conversation we had avoided in front of Maddie. Not loud, not cruel, but honest in a way that left marks. She told me she had felt alone with the secret. I told her she had made me alone by keeping it. She said she was afraid my first reaction would become Maddie's last chance. I said she had decided who I was without giving me the chance to be better. Both things were true. Truth can be crowded. Maddie must have heard enough from upstairs to misunderstand all of it. The next morning, her room was empty. The quilt was folded on the bed. The purple backpack was gone. On the kitchen table, under Marin's mug, was a note written on a page torn from her spiral notebook. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break your house. Marin made a sound I had never heard from her before. I grabbed my coat. The bus station was 10 minutes away if the roads were clear. They weren't. I drove like a man trying not to scare himself, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping my phone while Marin called Maddie again and again from the passenger seat. No answer. We found her inside near the vending machines, sitting on the floor with her backpack between her knees. A ticket was folded in her hand. Her face went blank when she saw us, like she had pulled a curtain down from the inside. Marin started toward her, but I touched her arm. Let me, I said. I sat on the floor beside Maddie. My knees cracked. The vending machine hummed. Across from us, a man in a knit cap slept with his chin on his chest. For a minute, I said nothing. Then I took off my gloves and set them on top of her backpack. My hands are too big for those, she said. I know. She looked at the gloves, confused. I'm not giving them to you because they fit, I said. I'm giving them to you because it's cold and you left without yours. Her mouth tightened. I heard you, she whispered. Last night, I figured. I'm not worth you two fighting. I looked at the floor tiles. One of them had a crack running corner to corner, dark with old dirt. When I was 16, I said, I found out you existed. Not you as a person, just the idea of you. And I was angry for a long time. She went very still. That anger was easier than being sad. Easier than admitting my dad had chosen badly and lied badly and hurt a lot of people who didn't deserve it. So I put the anger wherever I could. Some of it landed on your name. Maddie's eyes shone, but she didn't cry. That was wrong, I said. She swallowed. You don't have to say that. Yes, I do. Marin stood a few feet away, crying silently with one hand over her mouth. I turned back to Maddie. You didn't break my house. Adults did damage before you ever knocked on the door. And if there's fighting now, it's because Marin and I have things to repair. That's not your bill to pay. Her fingers tightened around the ticket. I don't know how to be in somebody's house, she said. That's okay, I said. I know a lot about houses. We can go slow. It wasn't a perfect line. It didn't fix her life. It didn't fix my marriage. But she laughed a little, one breath through her nose, and it felt like the first warm thing in that station. She didn't hand me the ticket right away. I didn't ask for it. Eventually, she placed it on the backpack, under my gloves. We drove home without music. A few months have passed since that night at the motel, and I wish I could tell you everything turned into a clean, bright ending. It didn't. Clean endings are for movies and people who have never dealt with government paperwork. Maddie doesn't live with us full time. Not exactly. There are rules, appointments, temporary arrangements, people with clipboards, and a housing program that moves slower than fear. But she stays with us most weekends now, and sometimes during the week when weather or life gets complicated. The room under the eaves has a bed in it. A real one. There's a lamp Marin found at a thrift store, a small desk I sanded and refinished, and a stack of library books that migrates around the house like a living thing. The purple backpack hangs by the back door beside my work coat. The roof still leaks. Not badly, but enough that we keep a bucket in the back room when the snow melts. Sometimes I look at that bucket and think about the $2,800. The old me might have resented it. The man I am trying to become sees the water, hears it drip, and remembers that money bought time for a girl who didn't have any. Marin and I are rebuilding too. That sounds prettier than it feels. Rebuilding is dust, inconvenience, exposed wiring, and the occasional discovery that the damage went deeper than you hoped. She doesn't hide her phone anymore. I don't treat access like proof of love. She tells me where she's going, not because I demand it, but because secrecy taught us both a lesson. I tell her when fear starts making a story in my head, before that story turns into evidence. Some nights we still sit in the kitchen and talk carefully. Some nights we just wash dishes. Both matter. Last Sunday, Maddie came over for dinner and burned the garlic bread because she got distracted showing Marin a poem she wrote for English class. She apologized 6 times. I ate 2 blackened pieces and told her carbon was underrated. Marin kicked me under the table, but she was smiling. After dinner, I found a note on the refrigerator in Marin's handwriting. No more locked doors between us. I stood there looking at it for a long time. Then Maddie walked past, opened the fridge, and asked if the note meant she was allowed to label her leftovers. Yes, I said. That's exactly what it means. She wrote Maddie on a container of pasta in thick black marker and put it on the middle shelf. Such a small thing, claiming space. But small things are where a life starts changing. I still think about that night outside the motel. The cold coffee, the snow. The ugly story I had written before I knew the truth. I think about how close I came to letting the worst thing my father did decide who I would be as a husband and as a brother. Trust is not never being afraid. I know that now. Trust is hearing fear knock and not handing it the keys. It is asking one more question before you pass sentence. It is telling the truth before silence becomes a wall. It is leaving room for the possibility that the person you love is not betraying you, but carrying something badly because they are scared too. Our roof still needs work. Our marriage does too. So does whatever Maddie and I are becoming. But the house is warmer than it was. And when I come home now, there are 3 coats by the back door. Mine, Marin's, and a thin black one we keep meaning to replace, because Maddie insists it's fine, it isn't fine, but we're working on it.